Well, we're going to go ahead and get started here. Thank you for starting the recording, Brenda. Well, everybody knows our special guest this week. She's with us every single week, but she's rarely the one who gets to chime in. And we're going to get to hear from her today. And I'm super excited to do that. And as a way of introduction, for those of you who don't know a little bit about Brenda's background, she got her license in 1987. She got me beat. I got my license in 1994. She got hers in 87. And she was actually managing her first office by the time I got my license in 1994. So she's been running real estate offices, been a broker owner for 3 years. She owned her own office, her own brokerage. And then she was running a 6-office Berkshire Hathaway company that had over 500 agents in it. And this was kind of in that central Pennsylvania, I believe, market. And she can tell you more about that. But she has a huge background, both as a life coach now, but even having trained a lot of real estate teams and brokerages over the years, since basically like 2012-ish. And we're just really fortunate to have her and look forward to a really good discussion today about how to quit trying to rescue and save everybody, right?
Yes, indeed. Well, it's interesting. Thank you, Mike. I brought this up to Mike a few weeks ago about me coming on today, because over the course of our masterminds in the last, I don't know, several months, a number of times it has come up where those of you who, you know, are the team leaders on this call are like, oh yeah, I'm always trying to rescue everyone. And, you know, I learned the hard way that I can't rescue everyone, and that trying to actually ends up hurting my office. So if we go back a number of steps or years, we could call them, in my timeline, when the office that I ended up being an owner in, I started there as a manager, and it was a Century 21 office in a suburb of Philadelphia. And of all things, it had 100% commission structure like RE/MAX, because they had this was like in the late 90s. So RE/MAX had come in and just kind of taken all the agents from everybody, so to speak. And so the guy that owned this office, you know, his strategy was, I'm just going to match their commission structure so people will keep leaving for a commission plan. But he didn't really change any of his services. So he's basically running this full service company in a RE/MAX oriented commission structure. And on top of that, did let everybody pay their desk costs in splits, which is very common to us now, but wasn't in the late 90s. And so there was no money. Like, he had not made money in probably 10 years or more. It was a family brokerage. And so he didn't want to lose what his father had started. And he had a new construction division. So he made all his money there, stayed afloat there, hired me to take the resale side of the company and make it profitable. So that was my first deep dive into how do we really become profitable in an office. And what I know now, you know, I can say in hindsight, one of the very strongest moves I made was looking at what we've been calling, you know, coaching up or out. And so I realized, first of all, I had just a lot of non-producers, because that's what happens. It can happen in teams, but it's really easy for it to happen in an office or a brokerage where people just kind of, you know, get lost in the shuffle, or nobody really pays attention, and you'll have 25% of your agents, is pretty much the national average, that are not producing. And so I realized I was not going to be able to save enough money. I couldn't cut expenses enough to make that office profitable. I had to get the income coming in. And so even though I did make some adjustments to the commission plan, which made it more expensive, which is always tricky, right? Agents don't really appreciate it when you change your commission structure in a way that makes them less money. So there was this combination of, I'm making hard decisions that not everybody's loving, and I want to retain those people that I want, and then I've got to coach up and out these other people. Now, to the rescuing point, I was a rescuer from way back. Rescuing is sort of a quality that many of us have. It happens in our personal lives. So those of you who really relate to this drive to rescue your people and have them like you and, all those things, it's probably also happening in your personal life and doesn't necessarily serve you over there either. But in a real estate company or team, it's really destructive. That may seem dramatic, but when we have people that are in our environment that are not producing, it is hurting a whole lot more than a lot of times we notice, because it's especially in our virtual world. Now, when I was doing this, nobody's working from home. We're all working in the office, all of that. But even at that, it's easy to just pass by, those empty desks, or pass by the people who aren't really doing it. They're sitting at their desk, but nothing's happening. They're drinking the coffee and eating the donuts, right? So I started having these really difficult conversations. I terminated some people. I can't decide if this is a good thing to put on my resume or a frightening thing, but in our industry, we don't have a lot of people that terminate their agents. And I would say I have probably hired and terminated more people than most, because being in like a Century 21, or even when I was in a Berkshire Hathaway, I was in a Coldwell Banker for a while. So they're hiring a lot of new to business agents. So I hired a lot of people, of course, recruited some experienced agents too, but in those brands, there's a lot of hiring of new to business. So I had to get those people up off the ground and really producing, because what I learned was, as I terminated, even though it did make some people nervous, they began to really respect what I was doing and what I was trying to create there. And I'm a very transparent person. And so my management and leadership style is also, really transparent. Of course, you don't say, that doesn't mean you tell everybody everything, but I was very open about what I was doing and why I was terminating people, and that we were creating strength within our group, which was a brokerage, but same difference as a team in that regard. And the people who are producing love it when the people who are not producing get off-boarded. Everybody's got some grace and is willing to let, especially new to business, that even a tough, big producing agent's going to give them a chance usually. But, a year in, they want to see something happening. And so it's funny, because one of the things I teach now in the leadership development trainings that I do are the principles from the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And in hindsight, what I was doing was I was creating the functional side of those 5 dysfunctions of a team without having read the book, because I was creating trust. Trust is always the bottom part of his pyramid in that book, if you're familiar with the book. And everything that falls apart, to fix it, you've got to start with trust. And when we are rescuing agents and not coaching up and out, we are not fostering trust as a leader. And that may feel harsh. It doesn't mean no one in your team trusts you, but it does mean there starts to be a little breakdown there, and it's going to impact different people differently. And so as you make these moves to coach people up and out, or to simply accept, there are some people, and hopefully you don't have this in your team right now, none of you, but certainly coming in, to a brokerage, into a group of people I didn't create and hire, there were plenty of people who just were not suited to the business, but kind of nobody told them that and just made them sort of, face the music on that and usher them out. And so as I did those things, it created all sorts of positive ripple effects within the office that frankly surprised me in many ways. Some of it I sort of anticipated, but some of it I didn't. And this included toxic people. So one of the things when we talk a little bit later about coaching, and I'm going to give you sort of my favorite, 3 questions that I coach people with, is this idea of coachable people versus toxic people, or non-producing people versus toxic people. Because people who are toxic, for whatever reasons, they could be, maybe on the innocent side, just like gossips about other people on your team or people in the community, things like that. It could be that kind of a little more innocent or accepted types of toxicity, to people who are really, really undermining, who are, oh my gosh, I had people, stealing other people's clients. Hopefully in your team, you don't have to deal with that. But, I had a lot of that going on in one particular office that I managed for a while. So there's that kind of toxicity, to actually, doing unethical and frankly illegal things and transactions. In this same Century 21 office, my top producer, and he had been the top producer for, I don't know, 10, 15 years, long time. One of the biggest producers in the whole market, not just my office. And I realized through a client complaint that he was regularly participating in mortgage fraud. Now, I couldn't tell, when you looked at his file that he turned in, it looked okay. But once we got this complaint and I had to start digging deeper, I found the, holes and the problems. And so I fired him. And that was huge. That was one of the best things that I ever did, actually, for that office, because everybody and all the agents knew, he was doing unethical stuff. And so when I took the stand and said, that's not happening here, they loved it. And we replaced his production just by everybody else doing more in like 6 months. And that office, actually, I took that office from being, losing money for years and years and years to profitable. At the end of my second year there, it was profitable. So that sort of gave me the confidence as I moved forward in my career. Like I said, I became a partner in that office and owned it with the other gentleman. And then we both decided we were ready to move on, and so sold it several years later. But as I progressed in my career, and particularly then when I went to the I also worked for 5 years for the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors. I was the director of member services there. And I did a lot of leadership training, leadership development stuff there. And so all these things work together for me to really fine tune this concept that when I'm trying to rescue somebody, I am not helping them. Every time we feel that desire to rescue someone, it's really coming from some other place in us that either just, it can be from like the place of a good heart, right? You want to help people. That's usually how we say it. We don't usually say rescuing. We say we're going to help them, okay? But the only people we can really help are the people who want to help themselves. And so that's why the coaching up and out is so important. And there has to be the out part of that sentence, not just the coaching or coaching up, because there are just those people who are not going to make it, or they're not going to make it in your environment. I never told anyone that I let go that, they have no business being in real estate, or they're never going to make it in real estate, or any of those kinds of things. I would just say, you're not a good fit for our environment. Because that, to me, one of the things I learned, because I did get kind of good at letting people go, not a good fit is just a really good way to say it. Because once you've made your decision that you're going to let somebody go, it's not a conversation, right? You've hopefully you've done that in the coaching process. And so your mind is made up. This is not about, if I ask you this and you give me the right answer, maybe I'll decide to have you stay. We're done. Okay. So being able to just say you're not a good fit doesn't really give them anything to argue with, because you don't really want to get it in a tit for tat about why you're letting them go. and it doesn't insult them. It's just, you're not a good fit here. I don't have the illusion that I'm the perfect leader for everybody. So you could go maybe to another environment and thrive there. So I'm not going to tell you you're not good in real estate. I just know you're not a good fit for us. And that's a pretty kind way to let people go. And it doesn't usually create a lot of conversation. It's pretty quick. It doesn't create it's not inviting a lot of conversation. And so that was sort of my way of letting people go. It's funny because I had this one woman who super sweet, retired school teacher, had all the right MO, right, for a agent, because a lot of retired teachers are fantastic at real estate. And she had a great attitude and did all the training, all the things, but she just couldn't sell real estate. And so when I let her go, what actually happened, I mean, I felt so bad. Like, do not, the fact that I terminated all these people doesn't mean this wasn't really, really hard for me. I had never done such a thing in my career. In my personal life, I'm doing for over-functioning, rescuing everyone. Like, it was so hard, but my devotion to making this business profitable was bigger than my fear of, the people not liking me, all the things. Just, it's never fun to fire people. So anyway, I bring Arlene in, and I'm trying to have this as encouraging conversation as I can as I'm terminating her. And when I was done, she got up and came over to my desk and hugged me because it was such a relief for her. She was trying so hard to sort of push her square peg in a round hole, because she meant, like, she wanted to do real estate. She loved the idea of it. But when she really got into it, she couldn't do it. She wasn't good at it. And so that happened actually a number of times. And so if you get a little caught in that dynamic of rescuing, one of the ways that helped me get out of that was realizing I am doing this person a favor. We are never doing anyone a service to let them stay in an environment they don't fit in. If they can't see that, we have to let them know that. And again, it doesn't mean you're a failure in real estate, right? It just means in my environment, this doesn't fit. And it's really doing them a favor. And it's a great quality in emotional intelligence, which is, I'll talk about that a little bit later, that ended up playing such a huge role in even how I succeeded. I mean, I don't have a college degree. I was a teenage bride. I got married right out of high school, had my first baby, but when I was 19, my fourth when I was 27. Like, I never thought I would work a day in my life. I'm going to be the perfect mom. I've got this successful husband. I'm going to do PTA and all those things. And that didn't end up being my life. And suddenly I was a breadwinner, and when I look back at my own career, I realize, because I have this language and understanding now, that the only reason I was willing to make the strides I did and have the successes I did in real estate was because of my emotional intelligence and learning the craft. You got to be good at the craft. And that was always really important to me. I always want to be really good at whatever I'm doing. But it was that ability. So emotional intelligence, if you're not, aware of it from how to describe it technically, it has 4 components. Emotional intelligence starts with you. So the first 2 components are your own self-awareness. And then after self-awareness comes my ability to manage my own responses and reactions. So it's not enough to be aware. There's a lot of sort of new agey or, whatever, fluffy mental health stuff around self-awareness being the key. Well, self-awareness is what opens the door, but you will rarely experience any real change or transformation in your life or how you're behaving at work, at home, anywhere, with awareness alone. So after awareness comes that, okay, now I'm aware I'm doing that. I'm aware I'm triggered by that. I'm aware I'm rescuing. So now what am I going to do about that? So now I've got to figure out how to change how I react, how to change how I show up, how to change how I communicate. And then the second two components with emotional intelligence are with other people. So now it is, how do I perceive? How can I be better at my intuition for what's happening for another person, what's going on for them, what their reality is, which may be very different than mine, but for them, it's their truth. And then how do I manage that interaction? I can stay tuned into myself. I know what I need. I'm not discounting that. And I can tune into the other person and do the best I can to support them. And, again, oddly enough, that's how both terminating and coaching up and out became to me, was that I was going to do them a service. If I couldn't coach them up, then goodness sakes, just to be kind to them, I need to get them out. They need to be coached by somebody else. They need to get out of the industry. I don't know it's not my job to figure out what their ultimate solution is. It's only my job to take care of the things that I'm in charge of. And so that's going to be to either help you perform at a level that we say is okay, whatever our production standards are, or we're going to have to, make another decision. It's funny, and this is where trust comes in so much, and why this kind of terminating and coaching up and out creates such a great culture in an office or a team, is that without it, you can't really build the level of trust that you can build with it. And so what I found was that in each different environment that I worked in, it was a really strong component of creating trust with the people I was with. And so, I don't know, Mike, do you want me to stop for any questions, or you want to, I caught you eating there. Sorry. Or do you want me just to keep going and move forward with some of this?
Well, I mean, we can bounce some of this off each other for a second if you want. I had written down some notes here regarding this. And maybe let me go ahead and just highlight my video too. 1 second. That way we can.
Yeah, because then we'll get into the actual coaching part of it. Is sort of a little bit part two. Okay. So but I felt like I just regurgitated a lot of stuff. And so I felt like maybe before we go to the actual coaching piece, we,
sure,
check in.
Yeah, if anybody has any questions, they can put them in the chat, or we can, any discussion points. I guess what I wanted to throw out is how do you know it's not a good fit? I mean, I know kind of what my barometer is, but what are you measuring this up against? Like, for me, it's like, okay, do we have a culture fit? Are you a good match for the culture of people around? Are you a good values match? Like, do we share common values, or is it really like, are we out of integrity? We're just not in the right place. Like you do, you have a completely egocentric or perhaps even unethical compass. Yes. We don't, so culture, values. What I'm looking for beyond that, though, for me is like effort and activity. Not necessarily that you're getting results already, but that you're continuing to demonstrate the behavior, like effort, activity. What are your thoughts?
Yes. So effort and activity are central to all of it. And generally, as a coach, or as a leader, you're not going to change who someone is from like any sort of personality or sort of fundamentally how they're moving through the world. Okay. Just because whatever that's a work environment, you're their leader. It's going to take more than that. Like in my private practice, I do a lot of that, but that's because they're just coming to me for transformation. And then that spills out into their career and their relationships and all the things. And so, but when I'm simply, your leader, I don't have time to do that level of coaching, So first of all, I think most of us know in our gut whether or not somebody's a good fit. We just don't want to admit it usually. Or we've got some part of us that's like, oh, maybe I'm being too hard on them, or maybe I'm being too judgy, or they're such a nice person in this other way, or they're so good. They love all of our community events and fundraisers, and they're just so good with that, So we usually just talk ourselves out of it. But you're right, sort of the metrics of, are they doing the activity? Because a lot of people, even if they're not very good at it, if they do it enough, they will figure out how to get good at it,
Right.
And so, but if they're not doing it, there's no hope. If
Yeah.
they're not on the field, you don't even know if they can play.
Yeah. That's why we always talk about, you gotta be there and keep showing up before you'll ever be good. Right. And
Yeah.
so that's why it's like effort and activity to me is the king, because if I can get you to consistently show up, a blind squirrel is going to find a nut. Like you're
Yeah.
going to do some deals. You're going to trip into some business.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
I love that. Even I tripped into business. I mean, in the beginning of my sales career, first of all, I was very young and a very different person than I am today. And I did not have the assertiveness or the anything for prospecting. Okay. And also no training, like right in 1987, 88, like nobody's doing training. They sit you down with a phone and a desk and, go at it. But I was the blind squirrel. I got a few nuts, but it was the super low hanging fruit, and I was never super successful, but I thought I was working so much, right? It's so easy in real estate to kid ourselves about how much we're working, right? Oh yeah, well, I did stop at the drugstore or drop these things off to my kids at school, or there was that, but I put in a full day, and that's what I thought. And then I took a job I was really part of a team, but we didn't call it that then. I was a licensed assistant for this big producer, and I'm actually sitting in a desk for 8 hours a day. And I was like, oh, holy cow, I was not working full time before, because having to sit at a desk suddenly 8 hours a day, I realized that was a totally different level. So that being able, just knowing that, a couple of the things that make it really hard about real estate as far as getting productive is that, one, it's a super low threshold, right? In every state, some are a little harder than other to get your license, but not much compared to most professions. So we've got a low threshold of entry, a high carrot and stick, right? Like there's this high probability, so to speak, that we can make a lot of money. So I can go to school for a few months, pay a few $100, and then get in this thing where I'm going to sell these, $1 million homes or $300,000 homes if you're in, a different market, and make all these thousands of dollars. And they're mostly thinking about the whole, commission instead of their side after the broker takes theirs or the team takes theirs. They're not thinking about the real split. And so it's very seductive in that realm. And then because there's generally so little structure, most people are not self-disciplined enough to really make themselves show up and work when there's no theoretical or literal clock to click in on, And so being able to keep the illusion away from an agent, like to me, that's part of the coaching process, is so that I know whether or not they're a good fit, is, are they living in that illusion that they're going to have a few transactions and make tons of money? This is going to be easy. Or are they living in the illusion that they're working really hard when they're not doing, and like Parnell said there in the chat, like really the scorecards, the KPIs, like you've got to track the stuff and you've got to articulate what you expect, because that's the other one thing that can make communicating whether or not you're a good fit is, do I know in a way that I can clearly articulate what is a good fit? Okay. So if I'm in my own mind don't have clarity on that, and I'm just like, well, we want good producers and nice people and people who do it ethically, and that's all great. But there's going to be a whole lot of people that are not losers, but don't know where they fit in that loosey-goosey description. So the clearer we get on what it is we stand for, what it is our team is doing, what is that culture? What is the culture of your team? And I sort of love that phrase, what do we stand for? Because it gives you a lot of power. It can lead you to a lot of powerful language for how to articulate, this is who we are. Because then, like, again, Parnell mentioned the self-selecting. I love it so much better when people self-select out or self-select never to come in. I mean, we could go into the interview process, because that was the other thing I became a master at. Because once you hire a bunch of people and they don't work out, you figure out how to be a better interviewer, right? And if you set the stage from the very beginning and articulate really clearly, and I would even go so far as to say, I don't even want to see your best self in this interview. Like, I don't care about your best self. I need your everyday, maybe even a bad day self, so we can see if we are compatible in that. I don't expect you to be perfect. This is a much harder, especially if I'm interviewing new to business, much harder business than you can ever imagine from where you're sitting today. What I need to know is, can we work through those hard spots? When you're in a challenge, when you're in a slump, are they, so what I'm asking without usually using this word is, I'm finding out if they're coachable. Now, if you ask somebody if they're coachable, they're going to say yes, because they know that's the right answer, right? But that's the other piece for absolutely knowing they're not a good fit for me, even before I knew that language, was, were they coachable? Because when I had people that I would go to them about whatever, a transaction problem, a customer complaint, lack of production, and I would get excuses, I would get some version of it's not my fault, then I just knew they weren't my people. Because I would much rather have somebody say, yes, I totally screwed that up. I didn't call them. Or I told them it would, our version in real estate of, right, it's going to be okay. You got the house is yours. Oh, except it's not signed, sealed, and delivered. And so now today, I have to tell you that last night they actually accepted another offer, even though they had called me and told me they were going to take yours. Because at least in the state I practiced in, you could do that. Okay. So, so I'd much rather have you admit that you screwed that up. Or, yeah, actually, I haven't made any prospecting calls for 3 weeks. Like, okay, be truthful with me about that. And then let's talk about that. Why did that happen? What's going on? And sure, people have stuff in their personal lives that throw them off their game. And that's okay. I mean, despite the number of people I let go, I don't think anybody I've ever managed, if you could go, ask them, would say I was any sort of harsh or brutal or, any of those things. Because when people had life events that threw them off, that's fine. I can have grace for that. Your team will have grace for that. But then can we get them back on track? Okay. Do they want to get back on track? Sometimes after a life event, whether it's an illness or a child or whatever, parents that are sick, whatever, sometimes they never really actually want to go back to doing the things they were doing. So you might have to coach them through that. That's okay. Everybody, most people have enough graciousness and kindness in their hearts to tolerate that. That doesn't hurt my trust with my people. And if anybody, part of my transparency and my style was that if you think anything unfair is going on, you just come tell me that because I want to know. And I'm going to either explain to you, at least a little bit, I mean, obviously personal some things are personal, but I will have some sort of reason why I'm giving this person a break, why this person isn't conforming to our minimum standards or whatever it is. I don't mind talking to you about that, but I'm not going to go announce it in the sales meeting, right? So I'm almost never did that ever happen because people trusted me. They figured if I'm cutting somebody slack, there's a reason for it, because that didn't continue. That wasn't my MO. I would get back on top of it, give them their space, give them their time, whatever, go back to it. It's an illusion that we have if we tell ourselves we have all these standards or principles or whatever words you want to use around them. This is our culture and how you describe that. But then you have people that are incongruent with that. As soon as you do that, then people start to not trust you. There's just because it's a lie. I mean, that's harsh language maybe, but it's true. If I let people stay, whether for production or toxicity or whatever, that don't fit these things that I say are important to us, then I'm not being in integrity myself. I'll never forget, I was in a CRB, training, the broker designation that NAR has, and whoever was teaching it, they asked, who in the room has minimum production standards? And almost everybody in the room raised their hands, probably 40 or 50 of us. And then they said, and so how many of you have terminated somebody because they weren't meeting those standards? And it was like me and one or two other people, were the only people. And he's like, okay, so the rest of you don't tell yourself you have standards and you have this culture you're protecting and all these things that sound so good and make us feel good about ourselves, when your hiring and terminating practices or the people you're allowing to stay on don't match that, because then every agent that works with you knows it's all bullshit. So that sort of the amount of self-awareness and ability to be brutally honest with yourself about how you are impacting your team is one of the most important things that a leader can do and be. I mean, it's really what you become, is somebody who's willing to look at themselves and say, like, okay, wait a minute, where am I buying my own bullshit? Because the people around you, your family, your agents, they know, they see it. And they'll cut you slack too when you have a bad day. Like, that's not the problem. You don't have to be perfect, but you've got to be congruent and being able to articulate what it is you want, expect, need, and being able to do it in a specific way is really an important part of that. Did I answer your question, Mike? That was a long answer to that short question.
No, it's good stuff. There's I don't know. Do you want to continue with the thoughts you had? Because I don't want to derail if you got
Okay.
some.
All right. So let's go. So I'm going to answer Parnell's question, that your last question here in the chat, and then I'll move into the coaching stuff. Plus, for sake of time, to give you some of my favorite things there. So it's funny. I have found a way to have people leave a team and stay in the company. The first office I managed, the sales manager before me was the second highest producing agent, which is really a bad formula for a sales manager. Okay. But that's what they did. It was the owner, it was a family owned independent company. And, the boys all went to school together. And so the owner hired one of his best friends who was very good in real estate to be a part-time sales manager. And he was awful. He was so awful. And I worked in the office and talked them into hiring me as their first full-time non-competing manager, because I knew that's what the office needed. And I had already built a lot of credibility in the office, just, whatever, working for another agent there and doing what I do. And they agreed to do it, much to my pleasure and somewhat surprise. And so this guy, fires his best friend from being the sales manager. But of course, we wanted to keep him in the office because he was the second biggest producer. We didn't want to lose his production. So I even managed to replace someone and keep them. I wasn't his favorite person for a while, but he stayed. So I think it's all about the kind of the process of how you do it. Part of it is am I coming to this person with the either language or sort of energetic position of you're just no good in real estate, or just you're not right for our team, but the company could still be a really good fit for you. Okay. As long as you believe that, then it's usually, because you can find your ways to sort of soothe the part of their ego that might be hurt by that, and maybe give them some really practical things that are like, so, this and that, and maybe you do this part, you might skip this part. You could say, here's a couple reasons you're not a good fit for the team, but frankly, as a solo producer in the office, nobody's going to care. Right? Because there's just a lot of things that being on a team requires. There's a very certain persona or type of person that is a really great team member. And there are those that are not. And many of those who are not will actually be able to make it as a solo producer in the office, or at least give it a shot if they don't want to give up real estate. So I think giving them some ways, so like here would be some things I might, recommend to you as you move into being a solo producer. Like if you have that insight and that sort of coachability with that person to say, here are the things that you are really strong at that will make you good as a solo producer, go focus on those and do that, or, something like that. Does that make sense, or is that helpful? Okay. All right. So let's move a little bit now, migrate into the coaching. Of course, all of this is so interwoven, but there are, for most people, when they are underperforming, let me say this one thing real quick. One of the clearest signs that you are rescuing is that you're exhausted. So what happens to those of us, a lot of us probably have very similar disc profiles. And, there's just sort of a certain type of person that is generally drawn to this thing. And we are generally helpers. We like to help people. We want to grow things. Okay. And that's part of what makes you sort of susceptible from slipping out of the emotionally intelligent, healthy expression of that and sliding into the unhealthy expression of that, which is the rescuing, which is over functioning for people, which is sort of overlooking or excusing bad behavior and things like that, well, nobody's perfect. And we start making excuses and we start explaining, well, there was this and there was that. But what it does to us is it takes a toll on us. So we're getting burned out because we're doing too much or excusing too much or covering, for other people too much, that kind of thing. So if you're feeling, exhaustion, burnout, all those kinds of things, resentment is a super big indicator that you are over functioning for someone. So those are sort of some clues on that. As you get into coaching them, most coaching that you're going to do, the solution, what's going to really help people is mindset coaching. Okay. So, because mindset, honestly, I'm sure there's a statistic for this, it's got to be 90% of why we do everything we do, if it's not more, right? I mean, we're all driven by mindset all the time, whether it's in a really positive way or in a more neutral way or in a really harmful way. It's mindset. It's what we are thinking, because our thoughts and our feelings are always coming hand in hand. They're like just two sides of the same coin. And there is not a feeling that doesn't have a thought that comes right up with it. And all of our thoughts have feelings that come right up with it. It's a little chicken or the egg as far as which one happens first. Did I have the feeling first or the thought first? Basically, to me, it doesn't matter. It's that we have the emotional intelligence to realize that's happening, to have the awareness that I'm having a thought and a feeling right now. And so that's what you want to get at with your folks. What is the hardest thing for them, let's say? For most agents, it's prospecting. And even most teams, and I think most of you on here, if not everyone, has their people prospecting. You're not just using ISAs and handing them all their leads. You're having them prospect. And so there's a lot of fear around that, but all of that is mindset. They are telling themselves something. They are saying the most common things for prospecting are they think they're bothering people, or they think that the person doesn't want to talk to them. So they have a story. They don't want to talk to me anyway, or I'm bothering them. Maybe the third being something like with expireds, that kind of thing, FSBOs. It's like, well, they already tried it and they don't want an agent. They're a FSBO. Obviously, they don't want an agent. They're telling themselves a story. And the most effective thing that you can do at the beginning of coaching somebody, in my experience, is getting them through a story that might be 3 pages long that they think about why they don't do the prospecting because their kids that and the elephant ate their homework and, like all the things. But it boils down to a very simple sentence. Like, I think I'm bothering them. I think they're going to say no, anyway, so I don't want to. Like, it's going to boil it down. So a lot of a coaching session ends up being getting them from their big story into that simple statement that is what is really bothering them. We avoid a lot of things with explanation and rationalization. But underneath that is a thought that is the fear. Once you get that simple thought, then my favorite process, it's 3 easy steps, 3 easy questions. You can jot them down or you may just remember them. They're that easy, but they're super profound, right? As many things in life are, the simplest things are the most profound. So my question, I get that thought. And then my question is, okay, is that 100% absolutely, we could prove this in a court of law? Yes or no, only yes or no answers. Is it true? They don't want to hear from me. I'm bothering them. They're going to say no. Well, first of all, almost every fear we have is something in the future. We're afraid of an outcome in the future. It's not happening to us right this second. Okay. So you're a teenager. I had 4 of them, so I did this a lot. Your teenager is late coming home and you don't even notice it. You're on Netflix, whatever. You don't realize they're late. And then all of a sudden it hits you. Oh my gosh, they were supposed to be home an hour ago. I haven't heard from them. And right away you go to, oh my gosh, they've been in an accident. They're laying in a ditch dead somewhere. You spiral down, right? Well, all of that's in the future. None of that's happening. Do I know that's true? 100% prove it in a court of law? Well, of course not. I have no, they could just be partying with friends. I have no idea. So almost every fear we have is about something in our future that we're imagining a bad outcome. So the power behind, is it true, and cutting through all the excuses, just 100%, I could prove it in a court of law, yes or no. Not, well, if they, or maybe this, or because that's where our minds want to go, because our mind just wants to distract us. So most things, the answer to that is going to be no, but you'll really have to hold their feet to the fire. People will come up with all sorts of great reasons to elaborate on that answer to that question. And you just keep gently bringing them back to, okay, but I really just need a yes or no. They don't want to hear from you. It's a FSBO. They don't want a real estate agent. Well, most people you're going to get to, okay, actually, no, that's not necessarily true. Okay, awesome. That in and of itself, I'll never forget, I was doing coaching and consulting gig with a real estate company, and I was coaching somebody live. We weren't on Zoom because we didn't have Zoom then, but it was like a teleconference call. And so I'm live coaching this agent on the phone and about prospecting, and her thought was, they don't want to hear from me. And coaching live in a group setting is always a thrill because you have no idea what's going to happen. And so I'm talking her through this, is it true? And she has all her excuses. And I just keep going back to, but 100%, can you know that? Can you know that? And she was like, okay, no, I can't know. They don't want to talk to me. Okay. So the answer to that is no. All right. So who would you be in the exact situation? You've got 20 people you're supposed to call today. You're not even looking forward to it. Like, we want to keep everything about the scenario the same, except you do not have the thought. So there's no thought. They don't want to hear from me. We're not pretending it's, whatever. It's just, there's no thought. It's not there. What would you do? And she just, in a couple of seconds, she was like, oh, I would just call them. I would just start making my calls. And like, her whole energy, everything about her in less than a minute changed 180 degrees because she was able to drop that thought. Now, sometimes you can just do those two. My third question, which actually in the process you would insert in the middle, if I had more time with somebody, it depends on how much time I have with a person. But like when I was coaching one-on-one in my office and I had 30 or 45 minutes, maybe an hour with somebody, whatever, a really powerful part of it can be, okay, so now you've answered no till you realize your thought isn't actually true. But let's look at and articulate how you act and behave when you're believing it. So this lets them self-identify the habits, the patterns, the feelings, the reactions when they are believing that thought. So it keeps them from prospecting. It keeps them from making money. They probably start doing things to distract themselves. Hell, they might start going online and shopping, right? Like whatever, like just get them to sort of start to brain dump all the things they do because they're avoiding that activity. And they're probably criticizing themselves. The amount of self-criticism, judgment, and shame that we have, like we tend to think of those things as outside of us. Other people are criticizing us. Other people are judging us. Other people have shamed us. And that's true too, often. But so much of that is an internal thing. And so when you can get them to actually, like I'm beating myself up because I know I'm supposed to do this prospecting and I'm not. I know I'm not making the money I want to make and I'm not doing the activity. Real estate's not that complicated. You do the activity, you start making the money, so they know that and they're judging and criticizing themselves. So when you have the time to really explore, it also really helps them in their emotional intelligence because you're expanding their self-awareness. And then through that next question of who would you be without the thought? What would you start doing? That gives them the second piece of emotional intelligence, which is now how can I change how I'm behaving? And so they're as simple as they are, they're super powerful in as long as you can keep the person focused, and that's not necessarily easy, and out of their excuses, just keep drawing them back to, okay, but the problem is you're having this thought that you're bothering these people. That's it. Like, let's just stay right there. And when you're having that thought, then what happens? What do you do, not do, blah, blah, blah. And then, okay, same scenario. You've got your 20 calls to make, but you don't have the thought. Now what? And you might have to help them with that. Like I have plenty of people, whether it's in real estate settings or personal growth settings, where they can't imagine themselves without the thought. They don't know who they would be without the thought. So sometimes you need to bring in, so to speak, a third party that they can imagine it through. Like even it may be you, it may be something you're really good at. And so you can say, oh, well, okay, let me tell you what it is for me. I love prospecting. I don't care. Every no I get, I know is getting me closer to my yes. I know it's just a game. I know whatever it is that works for you. So that because you don't have a problem at all with prospecting, let them see that and live that through your eyes and your story, or use an example of somebody else on the team, or whatever, if it's not something that happens to be in your particular wheelhouse. But oftentimes they actually can't see themselves that way, and you have to help them see what that would look like. One of my favorite tools for this, it's not necessarily real estate. It's not real estate specific at all, or particularly for a thing like prospecting or something they're struggling with, getting listings, whatever it is. But it is to have people think of somebody that they really admire. Okay, we got to go to that sort of level. It could be somebody dead, alive, somebody they know, somebody they don't know, right? It could be, it could be Oprah, it could be Nelson Mandela, like whoever. And think of those qualities. Like when I struggled in my entrepreneurial journey, and I don't know, my son-in-law worked for SpaceX, so maybe this is why I thought of this a lot. But when I would have something that did not go the way I wanted it to, quote unquote failure, I'd launch a big thing and nobody would buy it, whatever. I would spiral into self-criticism and judgment, and this isn't going to work for me, and all the typical things, because I'm not immune just because I'm a coach. And I would think, wait a minute, what would Elon Musk do? Elon Musk blew up so many rockets and had so much stuff fail, spent all his money, was facing bankruptcy, but he kept going. And then, whoever it was, I can't remember the guy, billionaire, injected some money, and that kept him going. And then they started having tons of successes. But so I'm thinking, okay, so when that rocket blew up, Elon wasn't sitting there going, oh, I think I'm a failure. I bet this isn't going to work. Richard Branson's going to beat me to Mars. No, he wasn't thinking that. And so being able to find who they admire and then sort of let them see it. So what would they be thinking? Is just also a good way to get somebody out of their own head and into a different reality, because that's what you're doing. That's what all coaching is getting you out of the frame of reference, the mindset you're in, and into a new one, so that you can approach that behavior from actually the different mindset, which was Einstein's whole famous quote, right? We can't solve the problems from the mindset that created them. So you will never get an agent to do anything different until you can get them out of that. Does that make sense? Questions, comments?
That's good stuff. I love it.
And this is why, sometimes even it doesn't work for you to be the person doing the coaching. Like I've had plenty of teams or companies that brought me in sometimes like as a consultant to figure out what their problems were, because I am particularly good at being able to identify quickly what's not working in an organization. So, sometimes they'd have me come in and do that first. Sometimes they knew what wasn't working, but they weren't the person to get their people into the different mindset. Like there's no shame in that. Like every great team leader doesn't also have to be a great coach. Like that combination just doesn't always happen. You may not be able to coach your people. That's okay. Find somebody who can. Or sometimes you just need that third party sell. Somebody, it's the way that, frankly, in this setting we're in right now, I could say something to you that you would be like, oh my gosh, that was amazing. Total genius, changed everything. And Mike's over here going, oh my gosh, I've said that 10 times. Like how many times has that happened to all of us? So sometimes you just need a different person to step in and deliver the message or do the coaching or, teach the program. I mean, I've taught tons of programs in offices and teams for emotional intelligence. And so then that also gives them a shared language. Now the team leader can go talk about emotional intelligence and how that's impacting this and that, and everybody knows what they're talking about. So don't feel like you have to be able to do everything. I mean, Mike, I'm sure you can chime in on the power of that, because I think one of the traps of being a leader is also thinking we have to be able to do everything and be really good at everything, which also leads to all that burnout. It's just another form of rescuing. And it drives you to more rescuing. So maybe you want to chime in on that.
Yeah, well, I think talking about the coaching for just a second, I think it's important, and you mentioned it, to help them have a discovery of themselves. Like, don't just tell them, but like let them have a discovery so they're learning it for the. So I think that's what a great lesson of leadership is. How can I lead someone by asking questions to self-discover the answer, which is the solution that's going to be for them? That's how I've helped fire a lot of people, but basically I just had a conversation which led them to quit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I help them self-discover this isn't for me, or this isn't the place for me, right? But that's also a great coaching tool to help people through their own mindset, or at least uncover those mindset problems, is like asking them questions to help them come up to that answer, to go, like you said, is this true? 100%. Could you win it in a court of law? 100% true. Well, no. Okay, well, they just learned something.
Right. Yeah. And what I love about what you just said there is, and maybe everybody already noticed this, but in those 3 questions, they were questions. I was not talking at someone. I was not saying, here's all the reasons you need to not be so afraid of prospecting. You're probably thinking they don't want to talk to you. Well, they may, da, 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 da. So we tend to preach at people and hope that helps them get it. And it doesn't. Self-discovery is the only way somebody really anchors in and changes the behavior for more than, 1 week of self, discipline of, I'm going to do my prospecting calls, even though I hate it, but that'll only last a couple of weeks because nothing inside of them changed. And it always happens through questions, not talking at people.
Yep.
Super great point.
Yeah. Kira asked a question. She
said,
the
3 questions.
Recap those 3 questions.
Yeah. So is it true? 100% true. We can prove it in a court of law. Okay. How do you act? How do you think? How do you feel when you believe it? So I'm going to the activity and I am believing my stressful, limiting belief thought. People that I'm prospecting don't want to hear from me. When I believe that, what do? I avoid it. I don't do it. I don't get, then what happens? I don't get the business. Then so helping them really self-discover their own escape mechanisms, what they're doing instead of what they need to be doing. Okay. And then the 3rd question is, and it's really important that you set this up in their own minds. They're in the exact same setting. It's the exact same scenario. They're with a seller challenging them on commission. Okay. And in that exact same scenario, how are they going to react and behave now that they don't have the thought, since I just changed the story, that the seller's not going to want to pay my commission? Like, let's say you're a top, 6-7%er and you got a lot of people in your market who are discount commissioning. I went through that in several different markets. So every agent's going into that fearful about being challenged about their commission. So we're not sugarcoating anything. We're not creating a better scenario for them to walk in. We're going into the same scenario. This seller does not want to pay your 7%, but you don't have the thought that that's going to happen. That's terrible. Whatever they're thinking about, you're not going to know what to say. Usually that's what comes up in that is the challenge. The thought is not really that they're going to challenge me. It's that I'm not going to know what to say. Right. So that's why you've got to do that good coaching on the beginning to get to your real stressful thought. So how would I be? Oh, well, if I wasn't thinking that thought, I'd probably remember the trainings we've had about how to articulate why our commission is worth it and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, oh, okay. And that's how they've really gotten there and they're not just telling you what they think you want to hear. That's the beauty of being a third party coach instead of a leader coaching somebody, is your people are always going to have a tendency to tell you what they think you want to hear. So just know that, you're probably not getting 100% transparency from them. Whereas with me, they don't do that. But you'll know it because you'll feel the lift. You'll feel a little freedom. You'll just feel that lift in them energetically. And it usually does just come out like, oh, I would blah. And then they have their own solution. Or even if it's, I would do this, and that. And then if they're still not sure, whatever, I'm going to go back and talk to my mentor, talk to my team leader, get some more, ammunition, so to speak, to go back into the conversation with them, but whatever it is. So the 3 questions are, is it true? How do you behave, react when you believe that thought is true? And then who would you be without it? Same scenario, but you don't have that thought. Because part of it is all of us who are, everybody who's a big producer, everybody who's super successful, Elon Musk included, they're not taking stuff personally. So the agent who gets a bazillion listings also loses listings, and they, respectfully don't care. Like, they just know that then that wasn't their seller and they're moving on to the next one. Because they're not having a thought, if I don't get this listing, I'm not going to have any listing, that's not their mindset. So part of a success mindset, and this is probably the biggest thing that gets us into rescuing to begin with, is taking things personally.
I think there's a lot of power that comes when they can take 100% accountability for their own actions and their own results. And when they realize through proper asking of questions that I'm empowered to have a different outcome by changing how I view it.
Yes.
Or how to look at that, it's like you're empowering them to be a completely different person. I've often said that there's 2 key beliefs with anything that we have to kind of bestow or try and give to those people that we're mentoring. One is that this thing works, or it's this thing we're talking about is possible. Like, this works. So show them case studies, show them examples of other people on the team. Let's see an example of people who are winning that you can model. Second part of that is that it's possible for me. Like, do they believe it's possible for them? Right. Yeah. And so do you have a process you've broken down that says, here's how I take people from 0 skills, 0 knowledge in real estate to selling 2 homes a month within the first 90 days? Here's our process. And now they believe, okay, so if I just stay focused on the stuff you're telling me to do in 90 days, I'll be doing 2 deals a month. Yes. So I'm going to let you borrow my confidence and belief.
Yes.
Temporarily. But again, kind of going back to what I asked earlier, it's like, how do you know when you're just out of alignment for too long? For me, it's like effort and activities. The culture and values are a given. So if the culture and values are there and the efforts and activities are there, like I'll be patient so that you can get results for quite a while, as long as effort and activity are still there, right? Because I still believe the blind squirrel is going to find a nut. I just got to keep plodding along. It'll click for them at some point. What are your thoughts?
I think one of the really important things that you said there is the ability, especially with new agents, but it can happen at any point in an agent's career, where they need demonstration. They need you or someone, and maybe multiple someones, to show them what that looks like. How does that work? So we'll go to the commission conversation because that's more complicated. They need to hear how you would answer these sellers' questions. and then maybe they need to hear from somebody else. Like I used to love so let's have 4 or 5 people talk about the exact conversation they would have. Because then as this person that you're coaching, who's maybe struggling or new to the business, that you're trying to figure out, are they a fit or not a fit? If they hear all that, they're going to start to find their language. We all have to have language that resonates with us. Otherwise, we can't consistently show up and deliver that because it's not authentic. So it can be the same message, but the words I use to convey it might be a little different than Mike's or a little different than Parnell's or whatever. We're all saying the same thing, but if I can't resonate with the words coming out of my mouth, I won't be effective at it. I won't have any, there won't be any energetic oomph behind it to the person who I'm talking to. So there is a point, maybe slightly different than how we think of training, where we need to help people find their language that is for them authentic, that answers your the question the way you want it answered, right? Those things. And so that's also where you can find a mismatch. Like you may handle that commission objection beautifully, or maybe I won't say beautifully. In this example, I'll say you may handle it like really firmly. There's nothing you've said unethical. But holy smokes, it's to us too aggressive, or it's too something. And I wouldn't want somebody delivering that message to my seller. Now I'm understanding, just whether it's personality or whatever, we're not a good fit. Not because you're not good, not because you can't have the conversation, but the way you would do it is not a way I'm comfortable. Does that make sense? There's a lot of nuance in there, but people do need to often have it demonstrated, and so they can find their own way. And then you start, however that process goes, whether they can't find their way, they can't find their words, or they do and it comes out in a way you're not happy with, you're starting to discern whether or not they're a good fit for your office or your team.
Yeah, I love a lot of the discussion we're having here, because it's really helping us be better leaders, getting us to help them self-discover by asking them questions, whether this is the right career for them. Do I have a mindset problem of some sort that's preventing me from taking action? Do I just not believe that this works? Do I not believe I can do it? It's like there's all this, self-limiting language they probably have that we need to program out of them. One thing you mentioned when it was like showing them examples, I think as a team leader, we have several ways we can do this. One is get good discussion in your team meetings. So in your team meetings, have like an objection or have something we're talking about, and then get everyone to go around and say, okay, well, how would you say it? Let's role play. How would you say it? And just get like 5-10 different people to kind of share like their script, their dialogue for that thing. And this is one of the reasons why I love, as a team leader, I always love to have a variety of coaching materials. So I might pull in, some videos that I really liked from this particular trainer, and then some videos from this particular trainer, and then I'll teach something maybe a little different. So there's 3 or 4 different ways to say the same thing, to accomplish the same thing, but now they have more tools in the toolbox.
100%. And the other thing I love to do is what most people might think of as sort of reverse role playing, because most people do role playing of, okay, I'm the coach, you're the student, so let's role play how you would handle this seller objection or whatever. And then people hate that and they're stammering around because so I don't even do it that way usually. I will right away just say, okay, you be the seller, I'm gonna be you and you ask me the questions that scare you the most. What would be the scariest question a seller could ask you? And then I'm going to respond as you. and then you just follow it up. Don't go easy on me. Just hammer me with everything that would be your worst nightmare if that happened. And then I'm going to respond, because then again, it gives them that chance to discover their own language, because there's a big gap. They say this, head to heart thing is a long distance, right? So there's a big gap between I intellectually understand what I want to do and what, like with the commission objection, what the language is. Like I've heard Mike say it now, like I get it intellectually. But once I try to say it, I am stumbling all over myself and I can't figure out how to say it. That there's a big gap there. It happens in all kinds of personal growth. I know I need to set a boundary. I got that, but I have no idea what to say because we haven't been taught how to do that. So I agree. Like I would do the same thing, have 4 or 5 people in a meeting, say, okay, everybody share how you would handle this exact same objection, because it's going to help that new person or the person struggling with it find their own way. And again, you then have the great advantage of seeing if they can do that. Because some people, that's how we realize they're not a good fit. Like they get it, I've coached them, they've gotten language, but they can't say it. I don't know why.
and for all of you guys that are running teams, you have to, if you haven't already, please start. You have to develop a huge library of materials, of call recordings, meetings, of letting them hear a first-time call to an internet buyer lead. Let them hear how you respond to someone who's calling in live on a property with a sign in a yard. Like, hopefully you've got a mechanism of capturing those recordings, of listening to all of them, cataloging them so that you've got a catalog of those things to where someone can go back later and hear 15 or 20 buyer phone calls in a row. And here's all the ones with this outcome or that outcome or the other outcome, so they can just hear the language of how you're doing something. And the more we can give them examples of agents that are successful that they can go shadow and watch them do a buyer consultation, watch them do a listing presentation, listen to them on the phones they're going to develop the language, and it desensitizes them to the scariness of it.
And the beauty that you guys have as a team versus, because I spent most of my time in brokerages, is that you can move, if you have enough people on your team that you have specialties, right? Buyers agents or listing agents and those kinds of things. I have a client right now I'm coaching in her real estate career, and she was really floundering as an agent. She's on a team, but she was, listing and selling and really floundering. She loves real estate, and everything about her would make you think she would be awesome at it, but she wasn't. And what ended up happening was she got the opportunity to basically be an in-house ISA. Okay. And she's loving it and creating all sorts of appointments because she doesn't have to do the transaction. She actually, even though in her mind, she likes the idea of the whole transaction, when it comes to the showing properties, writing up offers, like she actually didn't really enjoy that. And so she avoided all the things without unconsciously, not consciously, avoided all the things that would lead to that. But when she didn't have to do that, then she could just be totally awesome at converting, she makes cold calls all the time now. She never did that for herself. But behind that was this hidden, not really a fear, just really she didn't enjoy. She just didn't end up enjoying the transaction. But it surprised her. She didn't know that. Like, we have so many limiting beliefs that are unknown to us, and so many even likes and dislikes that we can imagine. But then when we actually do it, turns out we don't like it. Like, we've all experienced that. But it's hard to admit when you're in a job or when you've taken on this project, So I think that's super important. The other thing you said a few minutes ago that is the key to really all of it. And we could have had this whole conversation with different language from this perspective, is that of power. It is about empowering the person to be, and yourselves, exactly who you are, and not try to be somebody you're not. There's no power in that. I could pretend to not be a high D. I spent about 35 years of my life pretending to not be a high D, and it really didn't work very well. You know, I mean, everything in my culture said, you're a woman, don't do that. Be the little happy homemaker, do the, you know, don't do all that other stuff. That's not who you are. And it just made me super depressed. So when we have power, when we're in our truth, when we're in our authenticity, and we give that power away through those limiting beliefs and fear. If I'm afraid to call a prospect, or I'm afraid to have the conversation with a seller about commission, I've just given that prospect, that seller, the power. Now they have all the power and I don't. And that's why we can't find our words. That's why we hate it. That's why we're, you know, because I've given, as soon as we're afraid of something, that's the easiest thing to notice it from. Then it's because we've given our power to that thing instead of ourselves, because we can do all manner of difficult things when we have our own power, when we're possessing our own sense of power and don't believe that circumstances or people have power over us. We can do all kinds of hard things and they feel totally different than the stress of the things we're doing when someone else has the power. If that makes sense. Yeah.
Good stuff. Anybody got any feedback? Any ahas they want to share?
We've stunned them into silence.
Just muted themselves and hit their video. Yeah.
Hey guys, no, it was great. It was yeah, no, great insights, and I like the point, Mike, you mentioned about making a library of call recordings, for the team. I think that would be easier for all of us because they wouldn't want to shadow us as often, and then yeah, they would just have it in a time, you know, just in a time sensitive kind of fashion.
Yeah, I think as team leaders, call recordings are huge. I think if you can videotape buyer presentations, listing presentations, you know, those consultations, great. If not, just have the ability for people to shadow your top agents. So whoever your top agents are that are doing the thing, they're doing it good, they're following the core process. Just create opportunities for these new people to shadow them and let them see a live demonstration of what quality appointments look like, of what a good presentation looks like. They just need to see it, you know, in as many different ways as we can facilitate that. So, well, good stuff, guys. Brenda, thanks for sharing today. I know we don't get to hear from you enough, but I appreciate you being willing to jump on and give us some stuff. I'm guilty of trying to save everybody myself. I think somehow I can, and I can't. So just giving everyone permission to you know, self-discover that this is for them and they just need to change some mindsets or behaviors, or this isn't for you, and just, you know, allowing them to self-discover that. Yeah, good stuff.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, you guys have a good week. Let us know if we can help you in any way, and go out there and crush it.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.